All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with John Petrocelli. John, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Kevin. Great to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
I am definitely looking forward to this conversation too. And I want to give a shout out to the folks over at the Podcast Guest platform because that's how you and I met.
Yep.
And it's really kind of cool because those guys, I met them probably about 3 years ago, and now they've become a really valuable resource for me. And every once in a while, maybe like once every 3 to 5 weeks, I'll get an email from them saying, "Hey, Kev, here's a couple of people we think who would be great guests for the $1 Million Relationships Podcast." And I have had such a great experience with the people that they recommend that, like, now it's kind of like Christmas time, John. I get an email from them, I'm like, I'm not sure what's in there, but it's going to be good, you know? And
Yeah,
so,
that's great.
and and then you and I, we've already got to have a conversation and get to know each other a little bit. And I'll tell you, man, you are quite the expert at your craft. And the other thing, I know we were just talking about this right before we hit the record button. Man, you are just place a really high value on right relationships, and you are a connector and just really, I mean, it's just you've got a gift for just connecting with the right kind of people and stuff. So and I share that too. And so I'm like especially excited to have this conversation with you today.
Yeah,
And
same here.
so we'll just dig in. I'll just start with a nice simple question to get us rolling, and we'll explore deeper from there. What do you do, John, and who do you serve?
So I am the founder of Bulldog DM or Bulldog Digital Media, and we are the world's most experienced live stream studio, which means we provide all of the turnkey services and the related strategies that a client would need to, master their live video offering. And a client for us could be a brand like an AT&T or a Coca-Cola, could be an ad agency, it could be a social media platform, or even a promoter in the music business, or a sports entity in the sports world, or even a team. Or it could be a subset of all those entities kind of functioning together in harmony. And we just celebrated our 14th year in business, and I've been in live streaming for now 20 years, which is almost as long as it's been an industry. So I've
Wow.
certainly learned, it's been a baptism by fire, especially
Yeah.
in where, media and advertising and technology cross connect in a live environment. It's never been dull or boring. It's a fast changing space, and it's certainly kept me interested, engaged, and thriving, and excited about the space as well.
Yeah. And we're seeing more and more of this now on so many more platforms of this live streaming. And you're right, there's a lot of change happening really fast. And so, and I think you were wanting to share something around that. So,
Yeah, I think right now, more than ever, this has got a big kind of magnifying glass on it, and I think we all noticed that live video became almost a global user adopted behavior in the pandemic, right? So if all at once, if you were a grandparent, you would, speak with your family through Zoom. If you were a child or a student, you took your classes through distance learning.
yep.
Anybody who used to go physically during the pandemic to a trade show now did that virtually, and all, the music artists were in their homes, performing in their home studios, and everybody all of a sudden globally knew how to play live video or stream it. So that put a lot of attention in the space, and then I think it corrected coming out of the pandemic. But now Netflix is actively offering a considerable amount of live content, whether that's the NFL games on Christmas Day, or recently they did the Home Run Derby for Major League Baseball. You're seeing major comedians, Chris Rock, Dave Chappelle experiences. They're offering the WWE every Monday night. And I think they're now seeing, there's in that space where you're having subscribers sign up. I think there's a little bit of subscriber fatigue now. And
Okay.
those platforms are looking, hey, how can I drive other revenues, especially my shareholders want results. I think Netflix, I just read, is now at 250 million people doing some sort of ad based consumption of video on that platform. And as a result, we're seeing the other platforms do the same thing. They're cranking out a lot of live video on platforms like Amazon, YouTube. Hulu is now doing big tentpole music festivals, and I think the minute that Paramount was acquired by Skydance, I think 7 days later they announced a 7-year, $7 billion deal with UFC to live stream UFC experiences. So the space is got a massive amount of attention on it. And I said, I've been at it for a while, so I've seen, some ups and some downs, some expansion, some contraction, but now more than ever, I think it's really, really validated. And as a result, all these platforms now offer live video in some way. YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok all have those capabilities inherent in their platforms and different ways to monetize too. So it's as I said, it's never been dull and never been unchallenging, but that's also making it exciting for people like me that operate in that space.
Yeah. So for somebody like you who's been in the space for a while, almost since its inception and stuff, from your current vantage point, what's your vision for this going forward? What do you see going forward for this?
It's a great point. And I think, looking back, prior to opening this business and starting this business, I had been overseeing a kind of a boutique live streaming company. And I sold that into AEG, who people might know as the world's largest presenter of live sports and live music. So they're number two behind Live Nation in music promotion. They own things like Coachella. They own a third of the Lakers in the NBA, the Kings in the NHL, the big, LA Live, massive entertainment district in LA, but also similar arenas and stadiums around the world. And, I was operating now in a live company with like a live DNA through it. And just as we had gone through that acquisition, I had gone to YouTube and said, "Hey, this is a business that you might want to consider." And they said, "Yeah, I think we would be interested in that." So we did a proof of concept with all the planets aligned and Alicia Keys performing at an AEG venue in Times Square, and we executed and powered that and live streamed that on YouTube, brought to the viewer by American Express. And YouTube came back to me and said, "Hey, you're right. We had a very happy artist in Alicia Keys. She was about to release a record. We had an over the moon audience, commenting that they could tune in live together. And also critically important to us was the brand was delighted. Amex has now looks at this as a possibility. So we quickly got into business and powered everything on YouTube: Coachella, Bonnaroo, Rock in Rio, product launches, movie premieres." And I thought, oh wow, this is the future. This is definitely going to happen. And I spun out and I formed this business. And I quickly realized that without those massive, tentpole anchors in AEG and YouTube, I had to kind of start all over. And I realized I probably started the business a little early. So back to your question, by being early, it allowed me to go sit down with brands and Madison Ave and advertising agencies and say, "What are your challenges?" And just listen. And I kept hearing, boy, it's for us, it's cord cutting, brand safety, and ad blocking. Those are big, big challenges combined with, how do we get our arms around this younger generation, this, who's really driving the experience economy, where they really value shared experiences more than they do maybe buying material possessions. And so I decided to build a business that would address those challenges, and we were fortunate to do it. And for us, I found that helping brands reach people and expand the watch time, because advertising is probably the most disintermediated industry on the planet. And here, if we do our jobs properly, we build best practices, we can help brands unlock 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes of watch time. And, the general human attention span at the beginning of the century was about 12 seconds, and now it's fallen to below 8. And helping a brand counteract that and get attention in the right in meaningful engagement with a consumer is pretty powerful. And now the power of live, collaborative participatory experience unlocks that. So I really, that's the thing that excites me about it. It always has, and certainly that's the case, now more than ever in the world that this hyper connected world that we're living in.
Yeah, yeah. So, John, how did you get in to doing this line of work and stuff? I mean, what's some of your backstory about how did we end up here?
I always found that I valued experience. It's kind of what that younger generation did. It's always been in my DNA. If I wanted to go see an artist or go to a sporting event, I would figure out, either saving up some money to do that or a way to go and attend. And that kind of translated into, my work. And initially, I was involved in streaming when it became an industry. People might remember the format wars way back when it was Microsoft had the Windows Media Player, Apple had QuickTime, and Real had the Real Player. And they were all kind of battling it out in the early days to get on that desktop and be the way that you would download a video and play it back. And I was in the content delivery network business, so I was really Switzerland. I was supporting all those formats, and my clients being in LA, my clients were broadcasters, movie studios, record labels, sports entities, etc. And that kind of gave me a look into the future. And I was approached by Apple, and Apple said to me, "Hey, we're really happy with the work you're doing with QuickTime, particularly in the music industry. We've been approached by an artist who wants to do this themselves. Would you be interested in maybe having a conversation with that entity?" I said, "Sure. Who is it?" And they told me it was Prince, and I'm a massive fan. And I had also started to think to myself that blasting all this content everywhere and this is also back when file sharing was kind of rampant. I
Okay.
thought there's going to come a day where this content needs to be monetized or protected, or you have to access it through, be authorized to do it. And I started getting into that space as well, digital rights management, anti-piracy.
Okay.
And it was hard to explain that back then. I think it still is today. So I went onto a file sharing network. I took a copy of Purple Rain and I had an engineer encrypt it. And when you went to play it, it says, "Hey, Kevin, thanks. You need to be authorized to play this," meaning you got to sign up for the fan club or you got to pay 99 cents. Or if you're a fan club member, that price drops down to 77 cents. Anyway, so I sent that over to his organization. And within a couple of days, I got this email back in the middle of the night that says, "Prince says in quotes, this is exactly what I want to do." And I was spelled EYE and it was the number two, which so he communicated in writing that way as well.
Uh-huh.
And we were off to the races. I built him really the first direct to consumer music service for a major artist. And he filled that with audio, video, unreleased material, EP, LP, footage of him performing live. And then he came back and said, "I also want to go on a tour. I'm going to go on a massive tour through big arenas. And I want to provide my fan club with the best, 3, 4, 5,000 tickets at the venue, whether I'm playing the Staples Center or Madison Square Garden." So I had to with my engineers, build him a ticketing platform. And now everybody wanted to sign up because now they would get his content and they would also get the best seats for his tour, which was billed as a pretty big tour in his life. I think the word comeback tour was socialized around that. So I was invited to go see him do some warm up, gigs for that tour. And it blew my mind. It was just incredible. And I saw two shows back to back, and they were like at 2 in the morning at the House of Blues in Las Vegas. And both nights the set list was different. And so I've heard him referred to as the Mozart of our generation. And I began to think, rather than me pick up the phone and call, my friends or call, "Hey, Kevin, I just saw Prince did this amazing performance and he was jamming with Stevie Wonder and Alicia Keys." I thought there's going to come a day where this will be a shared experience, right? There'll be people in the venue, in the room, but there'll also be an amplified audience tuning in together in some capacity. And that's when a light bulb kind of went off in my head that this is where this is headed. And I was committed to that space. And it was again, I was early, and people remembered my industry more for its failures, like the Victoria's Secret fashion show that quote crashed the internet, or Oprah did one of her television broadcasts live streamed, and that had the same challenge. And eventually, if we all persevered and bandwidth became more distributed and ubiquitous to homes and office buildings, the industry finally kind of rose from those early challenges. But that's the backstory of how I got into it, and then it led to my acquisition at AEG, and then also helping YouTube move into the live space. So it was really Prince, AEG, and YouTube again, just reinforcing that this is where this world is headed.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So now that we've got some context set here, and listeners have a little bit of an idea of who you are and what you're all about, John, I want to switch gears just a little bit. I want to dig deeper and start really looking at the relationship side around all of this.
Hmm.
So, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Yeah, fortunately for me, I've been exposed to some pretty iconic figures, but I've also worked for some, I think, tremendous leaders. And early in my career, I worked for a telecommunications company that was really all about sales. And this individual at the time was, a young guy. Rob Hale ran this business in Boston, and today he's a self-made billionaire, minority owner of the Boston Celtics, and he's been in the media for going and giving keynotes at graduations and giving duffel bags of cash to all the graduates, and it's in two denominations. It could be $2,500 in one stack and 25 in another, and his whole mission is about giving back. So is it that one stack is for you and one is for you to pay it forward and donate it to a charity or a cause of some kind? Early in my 20s, I got to work for him and saw his leadership style. And then at AEG, Tim Lywicki, who ran that business and that company almost, and also had a background in professional sports. But the two big, I think, influences more so than anything have certainly been that exposure to Prince. Again, fearless in trying, always wanted to try something new and different, incredibly creative, wrote two songs a day and put everything into this vault that's got 4,000 pieces of content that's never seen, hasn't been released yet.
Wow.
And just innovative and was curious about it. Could also play 23 different instruments, arranged all and produced all his music, and also created hits for a myriad of other artists. An interesting thing about him too, very quietly, a massive philanthropist. He, supported a lot of causes with his time, but more so with his money, but didn't want any exposure around that or making that public. And then the other real driver for me in my career has been Mark Cuban. And what people don't realize is Mark is the godfather of the streaming industry. As a college, he went to college in Indiana, graduated and moved to Dallas. He's from Pittsburgh originally, and wanted to hear his university's basketball games. And he's out of market; he couldn't do it. And he'd call his buddies who were still in market, and they'd be on speakerphone and they put the phone up to the radio so he could hear the broadcast. And that set him on a course to thinking, there's got to be a way for me to do this, as the internet became prevalent. And he figured out how to take that audio feed, encode it, and distribute it. And then he realized, this is interesting for me. There's advertising and dollars involved. There's also listeners. And he started to aggregate a lot of other college sports organizations. And he had a business called AudioNet. He expanded that into a company called broadcast.com and added other forms of content. And Yahoo came in and bought that for $5.7 billion. And this is around the late 90s. I thought there's a business here, beyond what this guy has figured out. And I got into streaming because of it. I started to read everything that he had written. I started to follow interviews, and also, you hear him on Shark Tank. He espouses a lot of his beliefs there. And a couple of things that resonated with me is, sales cures all. Is can cure a company as you're starting it or you're an entrepreneur. And other things he said, if there's no customers, no company. And I've taken that to heart. And I've also had the benefit of interacting with him, once or twice. And but it all came together for me recently. I was on a flight, a Delta flight, and there was a master class for entrepreneurs, and it was featuring him. And I watched it twice, and he had put it all together. His entire thinking, strategy, Shark Tank, cost plus drugs, all the other things, the Dallas Mavericks, and just laid it out. It was just a fascinating, discourse. And I'm like, wow, it all kind of came together. And I emailed him. I got off the plane and said, "This is fantastic." And he's a guy who'll respond to email. He's pretty communicative in that way, not so in other forms. But but certainly, I think early in my career, Prince and Mark Cuban, Mark throughout it have been incredible beacons and sources of inspiration, have really kind of elevated me. And I think also too for great lessons for other entrepreneurs as well. I think perseverance, hustle, knowing how to allocate your time, looking for the whole notion of skating to where the puck is going versus where it currently is have all been kind of great guideposts in how I've run my business and how I've operated my career.
Yeah. Wow, that's really fascinating. So, what is an example of a situation where you personally got to make this really substantial impact? And I don't know, maybe in the moment, maybe it even surprised you a little bit, where you were just like, wow, look at what happened right there. And yet you also know that would have not been possible if not for the relationship that you had with either one of these gentlemen. What's an example of a situation where you were empowered in that way?
I think for my business, it took me a while. I didn't want to have 50,000 customers. I wanted to have an elite list of big customers where you could do all kinds of things. And
Okay.
I was calling on AT&T somewhat, repeatedly, and they had relocated most of their content division out to LA, and I was able to get into a meeting, and they had a pretty major sponsorship with the Masters, and as part of that sponsorship, they were allowed to live stream the Masters on an AT&T platform. So it's either the Masters proper, the CBS broadcast, or AT&T did have this capability. And we won this opportunity to showcase that experience in multiple camera feeds. So you could see the leaders, the Amen corner, and another part of the course. And we were also layered in the leaderboard, where people were on the course. And it became this really cool, immersive experience. And, so now we had gained a foothold into that relationship. And I thought of, this is where the voice of Mark Cuban is, hey, you've got to, be persistent. And, the other idea was I've always found being, if you're aggressive, you're going to put people off. If you're passive, they're going to put you off. But if you're assertive, somewhere in the middle, and you're providing value and you're giving them information, that can lead to success with customers, especially customers like that. And a short time later, they came back to me and said, 5G is going to be a real big thing for us. Do you have ideas on how you could help us tell our 5G story away from the noise in the marketplace? And I did have ideas. And just as I started to socialize them, they signed up a pretty big partnership with both the NBA and the NCAA. And they were active at things like the NBA All-Star Game, the WNBA All-Star Game, the Final Four, and the college football playoffs. And became fascinating to me is those big tentpole events in the country, they're not just a day of the sporting event. There's like nights that happen that lead up to it. And on, Thursday night, it's Coca-Cola has a big activation, and on Friday night, it's another company or Budweiser. And then on Saturday, it's AT&T's night. And there's big artist music, almost mini festivals with huge A-list talent. And we built like a 5G fan zone where you could live stream these performances. And the benefit there was we were activating across a pop-up 5G network at the venue. And the audience, if they went to this experience, and we could also simulcast it to YouTube or to Instagram, but here you could change your camera perspective. You could see the director's feed of, say, it was Pitbull or the Jonas Brothers or Arcade Fire. And they had a partnership with Samsung Galaxy. And we could, those phones have really great, 4K feature, but the reverse selfie feature is 8K. Really powerful, cameras now in a handheld smartphone. So we would have like a pit cam or a stage left cam that would be actually a mounted Samsung Galaxy smartphone. So in that change your view experience, you're watching the director's cut, you want to click to the pit, the pit cam, that's actually a Samsung device. And we could
Wow.
also stream the audio in stereo versus most social media platforms have been, mono or lower fidelity. And for them, that was a huge. We went and deployed that at multiple NBA pregame All-Star concerts, multiple experiences at the Final Four and the college football playoffs, and it did. I think it demonstrated to the digital audience, which was much larger than the in-room audience, AT&T's differentiator in how they deliver and present technology and literally put it into your hands. And uh, in my world, I had to be alert and fast. Hey, I'm into this relationship now, and now they're coming to me and saying, "Hey, the Masters was terrific. What else can we do, and how can we tell this differentiating story across these other things that are important to our portfolio, and they're important to both our existing customer base and our prospective customer base." And it became I think we did 22 executions across that AT&T portfolio over Amir, and they had great results, great success, and also the talent that was involved was pretty happy. We could simulcast to their channels as well, and they realized we're being, presented in a different, a super high quality level of audio and video, but also in a differentiating technology. So it was a big win for all the stakeholders there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. What an awesome story that is. What an awesome story. Wow. Well, for anybody who might be listening to this and thinking, man, Kevin, I really love John. I love who he is. I love how he shows up, and I've really appreciated some of the things that he shared. They'd like to find out more about you guys and the work you're doing. Any websites, any resources we can share with folks?
Yeah, our website is Bulldog DM. That's Bulldog D as in David, M as in Mary.com.
Okay.
And we have a presence on most socials, but certainly I'm active on LinkedIn, and the company has a page there as well. But also you'll find us on Instagram. But definitely our website points you to all those places as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect. And for you listening, I'll make it nice and easy. Just scroll down below. There'll be links there for you and stuff. And we'll
great.
be sure to include that. John, is there any last thing that you feel led to share before we call it a wrap?
Yeah, I think that I've picked up a lot of knowledge along the way as an entrepreneur, and there's a lot of attention, certainly as we discussed, on my industry. And I try to tell people that there's never been a better time if you've thought about, starting a business or getting into a new evolving space. Live streaming is just that opportunity presents itself right now, partially for, the Netflix effect and the growth in general. But there's also, another part of our business is emerging in e-commerce live streaming, which is about a $500 billion business in China. This is where items are presented to the audience in real time and they're actually, sold. And this is, for instance, TikTok Shop has exploded here in the US. It launched in September of 23 and it's predicted to do about 26 billion this year in the US,
Wow.
which is more than the e-commerce business of, Target, Lowe's, and Best Buy. And that's a very, that's you're also seeing a younger consumers adopting that purchasing behavior. And because they can ask questions, hey, does that sweater come in a different color? Is the waistband, is that elastic? And one of the interesting dynamics there is it's lowered the return rate of items by about 40%. So the never been a better time to jump into this industry. One, because of the marketing capability where, brands want to reach and engage people, but also now, the commerce opportunity where there's calls to action in actual commerce.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Well, I'll tell you, John, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation, and I'm excited to get this out there and share it with folks. So thank you so much, and just like I said, really appreciate it. Really appreciate you.
Right, Kevin. Thanks for the conversation. I enjoyed it as well.
You bet.